And that is how I came to be kneeling in the lily pond, the cold nose of Carl's shotgun against my spine. I could see little between my wet bangs, other than the pale lady as she looked down on the five of us, as though we were about to put on a show for her amusement. Carl didn't hold me cruelly at gunpoint, but I was hardly in any position to thank him. The creatures around us, the brandy-low, I supposed, looked on with interest, but I had eyes only for the lady. I hadn't much cared for the phrase, meat from my table, and I felt pretty sure I was about to discover more than I ever wanted to know. The pale lady stepped out of the small window she'd been looking from, and until I saw it, I would have said such a thing was impossible. It was like a doll stepping from the window of a dollhouse and becoming a real person before your eyes. I heard the doctor gasp as she stepped out over the water, the roots from beneath it, lily stalks and cords of watergrass rising to catch her feet and creating a stare for her as she came closer to the group. She was dressed as she had been on the night I'd seen her, and her young old face looked at odds with itself. She smiled as she paused halfway down the steps, and Thurston looked a little unsure of himself. His shaking legs were making ripples that I was likely the only one to see.
And if I choose to refuse your generous offer, what would you do then, boy? I have my servants to call me, just as he does. And my time at your knee is over.
As she took another step, however, she halted, as if she'd stepped on a rock. Dr. Thurston seemed to get a little of his courage back, as his hand slipped into his pocket. I was afraid you might say that. My father spent years telling me you were nothing but a benevolent goddess, a creature of magic and light. But I knew better. He said he found you in a beautiful garden, but I researched that place. It's the site of a great battle, a mass grave, and what better fertilizer for your riot of plants than the flesh of the fallen, After you agreed to honor the 50 years accord with my father, the last 10 passing to me, I did a lot of research. I discovered your counterpart, though it cost me a fair amount of sanity to do so. I've spoken with his children, and they've told me of this green man. She let out a hiss like a scalded cat, and several of her brandy-low covered their ears. And how you and he have lain waste to your world again and again. He brings the cold, that which kills the plants, and when my weed killer began to go missing, I knew I had been right to plan a contingency. You were afraid that I would poison all these plants, but you were wrong. I love this garden more than you could know. Many of these plants came from my father's own garden, years of crossbreeding and cataloging that are now the only record of him left. I would sooner smash your totem and see this garden ravaged by winter than pick a petal from a single flower. You thought the worst of me, he said, sliding his trump card from his pocket. But I also thought the worst of you. In his hand, steam rising as it undoubtedly burned his skin, was an icicle as large as a blacksmith's hammer. It did not drip like its inferior cousins. It did not so much as dampen the outside of his coat pocket. His hand shook a little as he held it, but his face was set in a pronounced smirk of victory. He didn't look like Pa Cartwright now. He reminded me more of Gargamel as he held up his latest plot to destroy the Smurfs. The effect it had on the lady was sudden and immediate. Her lips skinned back from her teeth, her pretty face looking more like a moray eel. Her eyes became the no-color of lilies, her skin the milk white of an orchid, and her hands became the talons of a harpy. She was furious, the hatred baking from her, but she was also powerless to do anything in the face of that smoking ice slab.
You dare? You dare? You would dare treat me with hard eyes? You foolish Simeon. I should drag you below this pond and let you see the faces of the other fools that went before you. I am summer. I am spring. Your forebears once called me Titania and worshipped me as goddess. I have been alive since time immemorial, and I have never been insulted so by one such as you.
Good to know I left an impression. Now, shall we talk terms? Thurston asked, taking a step forward. This ice pop is a little cold, but I'm sure it could be colder if I were to throw it into this little pond. She had taken a step away as he stepped forward, hiding her face behind her hands as he taunted her. Even so, I couldn't miss the smile those nightmare teeth attempted to hide. Even in my current state, I wanted to tell him to watch out. But Dr. Thurston's comeuppance didn't come from the lady on the island. When Randy turned, it sounded like a bomb went off when he pulled the trigger. The icicle shattered into 1,000 pieces, right along with the good doctor's wrinkled old hand. Dr. Thurston screamed in agony, falling to his knees as he cradled his stump. Even occupied as he was, I felt Carl spring into action. He tried to bring his own gun to bear, but it was fouled behind him. He stopped leaning on me long enough to jerk it around to the front, but when I leaned back hard and crashed into his leg, he wobbled and his shot went high. Randy had no such handicap, and when he fired, I thought I was free for half a heartbeat. When my back registered hot coals beneath the skin, however, I realized that Carl's stomach wasn't the only thing that had been shredded. Even wounded, Carl tried to get a last shot off at his killer. His shaking hand, the one that wasn't holding his guts in, had brought the gun up stutteringly. He was trying to get a bead on Randy, the barrel shaking badly, when Randy worked the slide and evaporated him from the nose up. The gory remains of our chief of security fell into the pool, the red beginning to tinge the water around him. Gabe looked shocked, his gun turning like he hadn't a clue who to shoot. When Randy put a hand on it and slid it out of his hand, Gabe seemed almost relieved. "Don't be stupid, kid. It's over. The question now is whether or not you'll play for the winning team." I heard all this blearily. I'd fallen over at some point, and I wasn't really sure I could get up. The water felt nice on my back, and as my blood ran into it, I started to wonder if I was going to die too. "He doesn't look so good," Gabe said, the two coming to stand over me. "I think he caught some of that buckshot." "Nothing gets past you, kid," I mumbled weakly. Randy laughed. "Yeah, that, Gabe? Looks like you the new kid now. Come on," he said, helping me up. As I left the water, I was aware of that white-hot pain in my back and nearly passed out. I could hear my blood as it pattered into the pond, and my vision was getting a little blurry around the edges. Miserable traitors," Dr. Thurston said, cradling his hand. "How long have you been under her control, Randall?" "Not long," he answered, keeping a bead on the old man as he threw an arm under me to keep me upright. "Chuck came to me a couple of nights ago, told me about her. He told me her plans and told me I could be on the right side of history, or dead at the bottom of the lily pond. Sorry, Doc. I choose life." You have no idea what you've done," he muttered. But as her shadow fell across us, we all looked up to see her standing on a walkway of plant life. She was radiant, like a spring dawn, but I understood that she could be cruel, like the hottest summer day imaginable.
"You have done me good service. For that, I raise you to the head of my knights, here within my dismay. You, the one they call Gabe. You are welcome in my service as well, as is this one if it doesn't want to die."
I looked up, her words confirming what I was already worried about. "And if I choose not?" She shrugged, and the motion looked so pedestrian on her regal shoulders.
"Then you will die, as this manling will die. You are all so much nourishment to me. Thought you could be much more in my court."
I wanted to deny her a second time, But God help me. I didn't want to die. I agree, I said, my tongue feeling heavy in my mouth. Me too, said Gabe. It ain't like I got anything to look forward to here but student debt. Fools, Thurston said. You don't have a clue what she's offering you. She's not some benevolent fairy. She's a... But whatever she was, we would never know. The same plants that bore her suddenly reared up and drugged the old man beneath the water, silencing him forever. The pale lady knelt and dipped a golden cup into the water of the pond, the cup that had suddenly and unexpectedly appeared in her hand. She pressed it to her lips, and when she offered it to me, the pinkish water was tinged with a golden light.
Drink this and take up the mantle of Brandilo. Drink this and become my champions.
I wavered a little, nearly falling, but my hands only shook a bit as I reached for the cup. The water was cold and crisp and soothed my pain like nothing ever had. When I felt my back begin to mend, I saw her smile as I stood up on my own.
Now, let's begin building something new.
Epilogue. It's been a year since the coup, and the Cashmere Botanical Gardens have never been better. The lady has formally placed herself as the head of the park, though she certainly doesn't tell people that she's an otherworldly being. Dr. Thurston stepped down as the chairman, placing her as the head of the gardens. He talked about his declining health and how he hoped his niece, Titania, would continue to run the gardens just as he had and continue his father's legacy and his own. Well, someone who looked like Dr. Thurston did, at least. In what I've been told will be a very long life, I hope one day to understand how my lady does the things that she does. Randy's now the head of security here. We have more than enough help, since the other Brandilo have decided to stay here, to be close to the lady. They all pose as botanists or groundskeepers or security personnel, but their duty is to the pale lady and her ever-growing power within the gardens. The original staff were let go after Thurston left, and the backers have all been paid off and told the botanical garden no longer needs their support. I heard the governor was pretty mad about it, but one meeting with the lady and he was happy to see reason. She controls the botanical gardens now. All the displays are of her choosing, and it looks more like a prehistoric landscape than a proper garden now. The sidewalks are covered in grass and dirt. The walls are gone, save for those that protect the garden from outsiders. The collection of flora has become something unmatched. There's talk about growing things, edible things, and cornering the produce market in the area. But who knows what she's planning. I still keep this journal, so I can remind myself that I wasn't always one of her Brandilo. I see that many of the older ones don't have names anymore. They're simply Brandilo, and I want to keep myself from forgetting who I was. It's strange how much you can get done when time doesn't seem to matter anymore. So, when you find yourself in Cashmere, come see the botanical gardens. They're unlike anything you've ever seen, I guarantee it. But be warned, people still go missing from the gardens. The disappearances have remained the same, but they still occur. Who's to say that you may not get a better look at the garden's mysterious benefactor than you ever could have imagined? You're still here. I'm glad to see you've made it all the way through 5 nights of the Cashmere Botanical Gardens. I wasn't sure you would. I thought we might have some mysterious disappearances of our own. I'd like to thank everyone who's enjoyed the stories this week, and I'd like to thank a big friend of the channel, Dama de Blanca, for being our voice of Titania, or the Pale Lady. Long-time listeners will remember the Pale Lady as the counterpart to the Green Man, the spirit of winter, and I thought, what better time than spring to introduce you to the other half of our winter boogaboo. I dare say I doubt this will be our last adventure in Cashmere Botanical Gardens, so keep an eye peeled for all the fun stuff we do in the town of Cashmere. Before we go, let's go ahead and thank our patrons. Thanks to Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributor. And thanks to Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Marianne Schuler, Tyler Parker, and Jennifer Damron for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you'd like to support the show in some sort of monetized way, why not come down to Patreon? We have several tiers. I'm sure you'll find something to amuse you. For $10 a month, you can join my Ghostly Reader tier and get a signed copy of my book anytime I write one on your doorstep. If you'd just prefer to buy a book, I've got an Amazon link below that'll take you to my profile that has all 6 of my books on there, and if you'd like me to sign them, let me know. I'm sure we can work something out. However you support the show, whether it's by buying books or watching ads or just by being here, know that I appreciate you and everything you do for this channel's health. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening. You're still here. I thought you might be. Thanks for joining me for tonight's story. If your insatiable appetite for horror knows no bounds, might I suggest one of our playlists, or one of our previous stories in the archive? There should be one appearing at the end of the story any minute now. And of course, if you're not subscribed, why not go ahead and hit that subscribe button? Maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the spooky things that we do here. If you prefer your horror a little more analog, you can always pick up one of my books. There's a link below to my latest, and it'll take you to all the great things that I've posted on Amazon. For my book lovers in the audience, I always suggest coming on down to Patreon so you can become part of my Ghostly Reader tier and get a book anytime I write one, which is usually about twice a year. Speaking of my patrons, let's go ahead and thank them. Thanks to Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributor, and thanks to Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Marianne Schuler, Tyler Parker, and Jennifer Damron for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you're thinking you might like to become one of my patrons, follow the link below to my Patreon. And as always, however you support the show, I appreciate it. Till next time, Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.